Welcome back, True Collared Crime fans. We have a new microphone, so hopefully the preceding episodes will sound a little bit better. Sorry for that. So I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Fox, and I want to kind of take this opportunity to direct you to our website at www.truecollaredcrime.com. We plan to have some merchandise at some point, but we don't have it up there yet. And in time, we'll provide some donations to specific animal-related charities through that merchandise as well. These charities are listed on the website, and if you care to make a donation firsthand, go ahead, go to the website and click on those. It'll take you to that charity. And feel free to message us with charities, your own charities or charities that you know of, any information or any case suggestions, and I'll try to answer those emails as quickly as I can. I also invite you to follow us, like us, comment, and give some 5-star reviews on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I do want to give voice to the animals and bring awareness to the issue of animal abuse through this podcast. This podcast contains graphic and traumatic depictions of real-life animal abuse cases, and listener discretion is advised. Animal cruelty is the unjustifiable act of inflicting harm on, injuring, and/or killing an animal in an inhumane way. The cruelty can be intentional or unintentional due to neglect. Intentional animal torture and cruelty, IATC, has been linked to psychopathy and antisocial personality disorders and frequently begins during childhood. Researchers have connected adolescents' past abuse of animals to cases of bullying, aggression, school shootings, sexual abuse, and escalation into more violent crimes as an adult. IATC has been termed a gateway crime and is a major warning sign of impending animal cruelty. Since the late 18th century, animal abuse has been connected with abuse towards humans. Philosopher Jeremy Bentham lamented, "I am unable to comprehend how it should be that to whom it is a matter of amusement to see a dog or a horse suffer, it should not be a matter of like amusement to see a man suffer." He also argued that we should not be asking the question, can animals reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? We obviously understand now that animals are sentient beings, and they do suffer pain and emotional trauma. This podcast seeks to be the voice of those that have suffered in silence in order to prevent suffering for others. Due to the specific topic in this episode, which you'll see in a little bit, which is kind of near and dear to my heart, I would like to direct your attention to one of our charities. It's called Goats of Anarchy. It's dedicated to helping goats and small ruminants and farm animals of all different abilities and disabilities. Please donate. They do have a lot of mouths to feed, and they do a lot of amazing work, including prosthetics and carts for a lot of their disabled animals as well. So please go to our website and support this charity that is helping this amazingly charismatic animal species. So on to episode 3, the Spotsylvania goat murders. Welcome back, True Collared Crime fans. Again, I am your host, Dr. Lisa Fox. And for today's episode, I will depart from dogs and cats and unfortunately discuss a case involving one of my all-time favorite animals, goats. When researching this case, I tried to find data on the percentage of animal abuse cases that involve livestock or farm animals versus those that are companion animals. Unfortunately, I fell down a rabbit hole and I never found a definite answer. Many sites, such as HSUS, overestimate the number of cruelty cases that are farm-related to sometimes justify a political agenda. Percentages varied greatly from source to source, and often they didn't add up. There are even sites that rank countries in animal cruelty, like the vegetarians.co.nz, with Belarus and Australia being tied for the #1 spot, with the US in close second. But where is the factual data backing these statistics? Unfortunately, this data is actually in its infancy, at least in the United States. Until 2016, the FBI and law enforcement had been lumping animal cruelty in the all other offenses category. In 2016, and it's scheduled to have a deadline in 2021, which may have been pushed back due to COVID, the FBI started transitioning to a more detailed National Incident Based Reporting System, NIBRS, which has animal cruelty listed as its own offense. In 2016 and 17, law agencies that represented 31 to 32% of the US population were already using NIBRS. So in 2019, the FBI could publish these 2 years of data. In 2016, 1,100 animal cruelty cases were reported, and 3,200 in 2017. In 2017, 760 people were arrested for animal cruelty out of this data, and 96% of those were adults. 70% of the cases reported occurred in homes, which could indicate that these were cases of companion animals. And remember that these statistics are only representing 1/3 of the US population at that time. So the data was collected only using that amount of information. While the data is obviously just in its infancy, it will help us in the future years to be able to determine trends within the animal abuse in the country. So while we might not know much about the types of animal cruelty statistics, we do know that animal cruelty cases often occur in tandem with domestic abuse cases. As veterinarians, we are tasked with deciding if these injuries could be due to an accident or a hit by car, or if they are in fact abuse cases. So reporting these could also save the lives of humans. In 2015, Nida Interapanik, who was at that time actually only a third-year vet student at the Cummings School, developed a statistical modeling tool that looks at injury patterns to determine accident versus intent. So we've made some progress when it comes to animal cruelty data, diagnosis, and decision making over the years. And I'm going to actually expand on her statistical modeling tool in some of the next episodes that fit a little bit better than this case. So if you haven't noticed, though, I am stalling a little bit, but I really should discuss the case for this episode. As you already know, I try to give as much detail as possible, and unfortunately, this case is gruesome. While some minor detail is lacking in the original reporting, there is ample detail about the abuse itself, although I could not locate the forensic autopsy results. My request was denied for the autopsy results to the Virginia State Police due to the fact that I'm not a current resident in Virginia, and pursuant to 3706-1, Section D, which pretty much states that these files can only be released to people close to the case. Today's case takes place in a county called Spotsylvania, located in Northeast Virginia. In 2021, the population was around 144,000. There are no incorporated towns or cities in Spotsylvania, which I could find. The actual event occurred in a housing development on a road called Heather Green Circle. When looking at Google images of the property listed, I was taken aback as it looks like a nice, quiet, well-built neighborhood. But as we well know in the true crime world, looks can be deceiving. The police were called to the residence by a witness on June 18th of 2020 that stated that they had observed several people allowing their dogs to attack some goats and then hitting the goat with a bat. While that sounds awful, the truth that came out after the investigation was even worse. The individuals at the house told the police that the goats had been removed a few days prior and they weren't there. They were gone. But the police did not take them at their word, fortunately. After a short search, the two goats' remains were located on the property. Along with the bodies, the police also recovered video evidence from one of the individuals' phones. This video shows four people: Halie, the owner of the goats, Andrew, Charles, and Donald. Donald had videotaped the entire gruesome event. Halie encouraged her two large dogs to attack the goats. As the dogs chased the frightened animals, Andrew would beat them with a large bat that he had fitted with spikes as they ran past, and a machete. Charles appears in the video slitting the neck of one of the goats as it lay on the ground suffering. When the goats were found, they had been hidden under debris. Obviously, we were trying to hide what happened. Each goat had obvious traumatic injuries, especially around the neck, and they were sent for a necropsy. Without knowing the necropsy results, we can only speculate the trauma found on the bodies. I even tried to find the breeds of the goats and the breeds of the dogs, but I had no luck. They only mentioned large dogs and goats. We know that the witness called the police and they investigated around June 18th, so the end of the spring in the United States. In Montana, during the spring, wolf carcasses remained fresh for approximately 1 to 25 days. At around 20 to 30 days, the carcasses underwent bloat and then active decay, and then reached an advanced decay in about 35 to 95 days, according to the book Veterinary Forensics by Melinda D. Merck, DVM. The book further states that in 10 post-mortem or after-death beagles, rigor mortis was developing in most muscle groups at 24 hours. From 24 to 48 hours, the skin of the abdomen had a blue-green tint, and the bladder and thyroid began to break down. At 3 to 7 days and 23 days post, we began seeing shrinkage and desiccation of the eyes, rigor mortis in more areas of the body, shriveling and then peeling of the tongue. The bile color moved from a greenish yellow at the start to a reddish brown, dependent on the time. There was also a pink discoloration of the teeth, depending on the time as well. This means that whomever did the necropsy could actually determine the relative time of death as well as the cause of death. We can also measure the potassium concentration in the vitreous humor or gel of the eyeball in order to determine death, as this is not affected by sex, age, cause of death, or even season in human studies. This can be used to determine 1 hour to 120 hours accurately post-death. In this case, the examiner would not only have had to determine the cause of death, but also differentiate between bite injuries from the owner's big dogs and the stab wounds from the spiked bat. Puncture wounds are special stab wounds that would have occurred from the dog's teeth as well as the spikes. Sometimes the wound would reflect the size and shape of the weapon used, but this is mainly only happens on the tissues such as the pericardium that are hardy enough to maintain their shape after the puncture wound. Both the bat and the machete would have caused chop wounds, which have characteristics of other sharp force wounds, which are clean, sharp edges without bruising at the edges, as well as the characteristics of blunt force trauma due to the sheer weight of the weapon. Blunt force trauma can leave contusions or bruises, abrasions or scrapes, and lacerations, which are usually differentiated from stab wounds due to the presence of tissue bridging. If an animal is stabbed multiple times, the last wound may actually appear bloodless due to the lack of perfusion in the body. We know that from the articles that at least one of the goats was exsanguinated or bled out by a trans neck incision, or TNI. According to the article published in 2020 entitled Effects of Endogenous Slaughter Methods on the Behavioral Response, Bleeding Efficacy, and Cardiac Arrest of New Guinea Goats, an average size goat will lose consciousness approximately 75 seconds after TNI and can take on average 103 seconds to bleed out, meaning that even after all of the beating this poor goat endured, it would have taken almost 1.25 minutes to lose consciousness and 1.75 minutes in agony to die. So if we do some math, we know that the average adult goat is around 50 kilograms. So that's not pygmies or dwarfs. I'm going with a French Alpine, a Nubian, some sort of a larger goat, which I'm kind of assuming these are, but I'm not sure. And they have about 70 milligrams per kilogram of blood volume, which would be around 3,500 milliliters of blood. They need to lose around 40% or 1,400 mLs to die from blood loss, or 15 to 20% to go into shock, which would be about 500 to 550 mLs. There was one article using goats to gauge carotid blood flow, stating that an average flow of the carotid artery for goats, which is only one artery bringing blood to the brain in that species, is around 133 mLs per minute per 100 grams of brain tissue. The average adult goat brain is 170 grams, so the flow would be around 226.1 mLs per minute. At that rate, it would take about 2 minutes to lose enough blood for shock. But I'm a vet and not a mathematician, so don't quote me on that. It's still really traumatic about how much these goats suffered and how long it took them to die after these injuries. And so that happened to the goats. What happened to our perpetrators? Donald, Charles, and Andrew, mind you, these are the ones who did most of the maiming, and they also videotaped the actions, thank you, were all charged with conspiracy to maim an animal and received 3 years in the penitentiary with 2.5 years suspended. They were also charged with maiming an animal. Really? Yeah, maiming an animal. And according to Virginia Code 18.2-144, and they received a 5-year sentence to the penitentiary. But each had a suspended sentence of only 4 years. Yeah. So Code 18.2-144 reads, maiming, killing, or poisoning of animals, fowl, etc., except as otherwise provided for by law. If any person maliciously shoot, stab, wound, or otherwise cause bodily injury to, or administer poison to, or expose poison with the intent that it be taken by any horse, mule, pony, cattle, swine, or other livestock, or another, with the intent to maim, disfigure, disable, or kill the same, or if he do any of the foregoing acts to any animal of his own with the intent to defraud any insurer thereof, he shall be guilty of a Class 5 felony. If any person do any of the foregoing acts to any fowl or companion animal with any of the aforesaid intents, he shall be guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor, except that any second or subsequent offense shall be a Class 6 felony if the current offense or any previous offense resulted in the death of an animal or the euthanasia of an animal based on the recommendation of a licensed veterinarian, upon determination that such euthanasia was necessary due to the condition of the animal, and such condition was a direct result of the violation of this section. Yeah. So they both, all three of them, I'm just saying, got slaps on the wrist. And Halie, the actual owner of the goats, got even less of a slap on the wrist. She was charged not guilty to maiming an animal, as it was amended to attempted animal fighting. She was nolle prosequi, which means a former notice of abandonment by a plaintiff or prosecutor of all or part of a suit or action on the conspiracy to maim an animal charge, and was only sentenced to 12 months in jail, not the penitentiary, for the causation or permittance of animal cruelty. Needless to say, this case made my blood boil. Hopefully, in our next episode, the law will prevail. Thank you for listening.